Oh man, glad we're not in that owlery anymore. Way too much creepy owl-eye contact. Ugh, haunt my dreams. Well, now that we've learned all about Hodgkin lymphoma and those owl-eyed Reed-Sternberg cells, let's move on to the lymphomas that don't have owl eyes, otherwise known as the Non Hodgkin lymphomas. And you're in for a treat, because they come in a wide variety, classified according to their cell types and immunohistochemistry. Yep, you can find it all right here at Borgen & Burkett's shop for magical oddities. This dimly lit, dust-covered nook houses some of the world's most rare and evil objects. The shop has been run for decades by its owner and operator, Old Man Burkett. Less of a store, really, and more of a museum for the macabre and violent history of wizards. Now, before you go touching everything, just hear me out for a second. This is part 3 of our series on lymphoid neoplasms, cancers derived from the B and T cell lineage. In part 1, we met the leukemias, such as ALL and CLL. These neoplasms like to take over the bone marrow, and from there, fill the peripheral circulation with neoplastic cells. Part 2 covered Hodgkin lymphoma, which involved mature B cells in the germinal center of lymph nodes, where they mutated and formed a tumor, subsequently taking over other lymphoid tissues throughout the body. And now on to part 3, Non Hodgkin lymphoma. See that chessboard in the foreground? Those white archers are our recurring symbol for B cells. Non Hodgkin lymphoma can involve other lymphoid cells, such as T cells and natural killer cells as well. But these forms comprise about 15% of lymphomas, and won't be the focus of our discussion. When a non-Hodgkin lymphoma involves B cells, it turns out that these are mature B cells specifically. But what does that mean, mature? I mean, I vote, and pay taxes, and rent.
Ricky, honey, your meatloaf is ready. Who are you talking to in there? Is it a boy? Not now, Mom.
So yeah, I'm mature. But how do we know when a B cell's mature? Well, it all starts in the bone marrow.
Sweetie, if it's a girl, that's fine too. Honey, I don't mind. It's 2017. Is there a special way that lesbians say hello? Like, what's up? Sweetheart, can you tell her what's up for me?
Seriously, Mom? Do you even hear yourself right now?
Sorry about that, landlady. Anyways, the bone is where B cells are born and begin the maturation process. Thus, the bone is considered a primary lymphoid organ. Think of the bone marrow as this box here. It's where all these chess pieces originated. Next, B cells pop out into the circulation. Still immature, mind you. So they head to the spleen, where they gain the ability to make IgD in addition to their IgM. And voila, mature B cells. After they leave the spleen, they head to what are called secondary lymphoid organs, which include the spleen itself, as well as lymph nodes, tonsils, and specialized tissue in the GI and respiratory tracts. At Sketchy, we symbolize a lymph node with a chessboard. You know, it's where all those B cell archers like to mingle and wait for help from T cells. Now it's time to get activated. If a B cell latches onto a foreign antigen all by itself, then it turns into a kinda lame IgM-secreting plasma cell. Most plasma cells head back to the marrow, their home base. From there, they let those antibodies loose. What if, back in the node, a B cell gets T cell help? Well, then the B cell becomes a badass super specialized plasma cell. It gets permission to produce the really cool antibodies, like IgG, IgA, or IgE. Again, these plasma cells go to the bone marrow base, and from there,
Fire at will!
pew, pew, pew. All right, so take a look. Everywhere we drew in those B cell archer pieces are places where you can find mature B cells. And it's somewhere along this path that a mutation occurs, sending that B cell into a rapid cell division mode, with subsequent tumor formation. That's non-Hodgkin lymphoma, abbreviated NHL. Each class of NHL is characterized by its unique cell morphology and clinical behavior. And a lot of it has to do with where in this whole process the mutation occurred. What makes this a non-Hodgkin rather than a Hodgkin lymphoma? Well, can you read? No owls allowed. Fly around and disturb the merch, not to mention that god-awful creepy stare thing they do. That means no Reed-Sternberg cells to speak of. Non-Hodgkin lymphomas have their own unique set of morphological features that we'll illustrate in a moment. Another classic difference between the NHLs and the Hodgkin lymphoma is their pattern of lymph node involvement. Hodgkin likes to stay in a single nodal region, spreading contiguously from node to node. Non Hodgkin lymphoma, on the other hand, is classically associated with multiple lymph nodes involved, in a non contiguous distribution, kind of like those bats up there, just sporadically popping up. Thirdly, Hodgkin lymphoma likes to just stay in its little group of nodes. In non Hodgkin lymphoma, on the other hand, extranodal involvement is common, so we've scattered those B cell chess pieces away from the lymph node board. This shouldn't be too surprising, though. Recall that secondary lymphoid tissues include not only the nodes and spleen, but also tonsils, GI tract, and even the lungs. Lymphoma cells can even migrate to non-lymphoid tissues. Think CNS lymphoma. All right, it's time to introduce our first non-Hodgkin lymphoma, right underneath the Borgen and Burkitt sign. Burkitt lymphoma, named after the one-eyed Irish surgeon, Denis Burkitt. This lymphoma was first described when Burkitt was practicing in Africa and noticed that many children had unusual tumors of the jaw. Burkitt lymphoma is a very aggressive B-cell lymphoma. The malignant B cells are a product of a gene translocation. Gene translocation is when a chunk of DNA moves from its position on a chromosome to either a different position of the same chromosome or onto another chromosome entirely. And it's represented here by this super magical transporting translocating cabinet. There's a matching one in Hogwarts. Step inside and you're instantly translocated right inside the shop. What? How'd you get here? Nah, don't tell me you walked. In the case of Burkitt lymphoma, the CMYC coding region translocates from chromosome 8 onto chromosome 14. To remind you of this, we've positioned the number 8 up above the door next to the candle arrangement that looks like the number 14. This whole translocation thing kind of screws up the specific area of chromosome 14 that normally codes for immunoglobulin chains. When the CMYC gene is inserted into this region, CMYC is overexpressed. The CMYC oncogene codes for a growth-stimulating transcription factor, which leads to unregulated cell growth, as evidenced by these CMYC mice increasing in size. As a result, Burkitt is among the fastest-growing neoplasms, and you should expect the patient to present with a rapidly growing mass. Often, you'll see the Ki-67 fraction reported when Burkitt is suspected. Ki-67 is a protein present during cellular replication, but absent during the quiescent G0 phase when the cell is no longer dividing. The fraction of cells staining positive for Ki-67 gives an idea of how quickly a cancer is replicating. Because Burkitt lymphoma is a very rapidly growing tumor, it will have a very high Ki-67 fraction. Aw, dang! You have the Ki-67 model? That thing flies, son! Expect to see a lot of mitotic figures as well. These are cells in the middle of dividing, with a dark tangle of condensed chromatin that's about to split in half. You know, about to do that whole anaphase thing. Histologically, Burkitt lymphoma will show numerous uniform, round, medium-sized cancer cells. Lots of cellular proliferation means that there's also going to be lots of apoptosis, and macrophages come in to gobble up cell debris. These macrophages are surrounded by little clear spaces, little stars, if you will, among those sheets of blue tumor cells. This forms that classic starry sky pattern on histology. Burkitt lymphoma comes in 3 varieties: endemic, non-endemic, also called sporadic, and immunodeficiency associated. Don't worry, histologically they're identical, so you'll see that characteristic starry sky in all 3 types. The endemic form is found mostly in equatorial Africa and New Guinea. It occurs at a rate 50 times higher in Africa compared to the US, and makes up almost half of pediatric cancers there. The tumor typically develops in the jaw, as depicted by the respirator mouthpiece on his cool flight mask. This is a classic example of a non-Hodgkin lymphoma popping up in an extranodal site, where it's not supposed to be. In North America, the non-endemic, aka sporadic, form predominates. Still mostly a pediatric condition, these malignancies make up a third of childhood lymphomas. Unlike the endemic form, non-endemic Burkitt lymphoma usually presents with a rapidly growing abdominal mass, which can involve the bowel, ovary, and retroperitoneal tissues. The tumor is often pretty huge at the time of diagnosis, so watch out there, kid. You don't know what that thing can do. Last but not least, the third form of Burkitt lymphoma is unique to patients with immunodeficiency, as depicted by the store owner using a crutch, our recurring symbol for an impaired immune system. Unlike the other forms, immunodeficiency-related Burkitt lymphoma appears in older patients and involves the lymph nodes. as depicted by the lymphadenopathy necklace. This form can arise in patients receiving immunosuppressive therapy, such as solid organ transplant recipients, but it's primarily seen in those infected with HIV. Yeah, you recognize the hat, right? Sketchy Micro, anyone? It's the wizard hat donned by that evil retroviral HIV wizard. Anytime we bring up HIV, look for that hat. Pretty much 100% of endemic Burkitt and a significant percentage of sporadic and immunodeficiency-related Burkitt involve chronic infection with EBV, although its exact role in the pathogenesis is not yet understood. Once latent EBV wakes up inside the cell, it hijacks the cell machinery and facilitates B-cell clonal expansion. Moving on, the next type of non-Hodgkin lymphoma to discuss is follicular lymphoma, which accounts for 40% of adult NHLs in the US. We're back over at the fireplace because, yet again, we have a translocation going on. This time, it involves the translocation of the BCL2 oncogene from chromosome 18 to the immunoglobulin heavy chain coding region of chromosome 14. Just think of the falling sash, connecting the 14 candles diagonally with the number 18 hidden in the fireplace tools. A falling follicular sash, if you will. This translocation results in the overexpression of the BCL2 gene, which stands for B-cell lymphoma 2 gene. The BCL protein is an anti-apoptotic molecule. Think of it as a magical BCL2 bracelet that confers invincibility to anyone who wears it. Yeah, look at that price, though. BCL2 protein prevents the release of cytochrome C from the inner mitochondrial membrane. Cytochrome C normally activates caspases, which facilitate cell breakdown. On histology, follicular lymphoma will show a nodular pattern of growth. That just means that, under the microscope at low power, the cell pattern looks similar to normal lymph node follicles. Stare into the fire for a while and you'll begin to see it. Wait for it. Eh? What did I tell you? See those discrete round areas of hypercellularity? Looks kinda like the follicles normally seen in the lymph nodes. Just more of them, and more jam-packed with mutant B cells. In a normal node, these are the areas where B cells aggregate and form germinal centers. And fittingly, it turns out that's exactly where the cancer started. Follicular lymphoma is caused by a mutated germinal center B cell. Follicular lymphoma is the second most common lymphoma in the US and Western Europe, and typically presents in middle-aged Caucasians. Classically, follicular lymphoma presents with painless, generalized peripheral lymphadenopathy over a long history of waxing and waning lymph node enlargement. The bone marrow is almost always invaded by the time of diagnosis. Sadly, follicular lymphoma in most cases is not curable and has the potential to transform into even more aggressive lymphoma, such as diffuse large B-cell lymphoma, as depicted by our diffusely large patron over here. Speaking of, let's talk about diffuse large B-cell lymphoma, emphasized here by the largest B-cell antibody archer in the shop. It's not only the most common non-Hodgkin lymphoma, but also the most common lymphoma in adults, period. See that finger? Number 1. Diffuse large B-cell comprises a collection of lymphomas, actually, which share a few histologic and genetic similarities. About 1/3 of diffuse large B-cell lymphomas have a translocation of the BCL2 gene from chromosome 18 to 14, just like follicular lymphoma. And, as we mentioned previously, some of these tumors even start as follicular lymphomas. Another third of diffuse large B-cell lymphomas feature changes in the BCL6 gene, either by gene rearrangement or a point mutation in the promoter region. The BCL6 protein is a regulator of DNA transcription and gene expression. And since BCL2 was represented by a double bracelet, BCL6 is a hexagon bracelet. On histology, lymph nodes affected with diffuse large B-cell lymphoma will show diffuse sheets of very large B cells. Yeah, I guess you had that one figured out already. EBV-associated lymphoma is also seen in immunodeficient patients, such as those with AIDS or chronic immunosuppression. In fact, for those with chronic HIV infection, the development of diffuse large B-cell lymphoma is an AIDS-defining condition. So again, we've brought back our retroviral wizard hat from Sketchy Micro. While the connection between chronic EBV infection, HIV, and diffuse large B-cell lymphoma is poorly understood, the current thinking is that B cells are chronically activated, while T cells are suppressed and unable to destroy the viruses which transform the B cells from normal into malignant. Pretty exclusive to HIV-infected individuals is the primary effusion subtype of lymphoma, which can present in the pleura, peritoneum, or pericardial spaces. It involves co-infection with human herpes virus 8 and usually EBV as well. Note that this is different than the AIDS-defining Kaposi sarcoma caused by HHV8. At Sketchy, the herpes viruses are represented as Hermes viruses. Also notice the number 8 we've incorporated into his staff. This is the perfect time to, again, remind you that these non-Hodgkin lymphomas just love popping up in extranodal tissues. And diffuse large B-cell is no exception. So remember those B-cell archers scattered around the room, away from the chessboard. In the case of large cell, GI lymphoma is the most common manifestation of extranodal disease. Of note, there's another subtype, called mediastinal large B-cell lymphoma, which is more common in young women. Additionally, the most common primary CNS lymphoma is, in fact, diffuse large B-cell, often seen in patients with HIV and EBV co-infection. Finally, one more non-Hodgkin lymphoma deserves mention. Mantle cell lymphoma, a B-cell lymphoma composed of, you guessed it, B-cells in the mantle zones of lymphoid follicles. Remember, tumor histology can actually give you a clue as to where these mutant B-cells originated. And since mantle cell lymphoma cells originated in the follicle, expect to see a nodular follicle-like pattern on histology. These tumors occur from a translocation of the cyclin D1 gene from chromosome 11 to 14. And fittingly, the mantle of this fireplace forms a line between the 11 and 14 shaped candles. The translocation results in overexpression of cyclin D1, a molecule which promotes cells from the growth-minded G1 phase of the cell cycle to the DNA replication S phase, leading to more uncontrolled cell division and proliferation. Most cases of mantle cell lymphoma occur in older males, and at the time of diagnosis, the lymphoma has usually spread to the bone, liver, and/or the GI tract. While this disease can be somewhat managed with chemotherapy, it's uncurable. All right, the last part of this story concerns B symptoms, which are constitutional symptoms including weight loss, fever, and night sweats. Whoa! First time in a translocator there, buddy? That's okay, you get used to it. B-type symptoms are common in the aggressive non-Hodgkin lymphomas, including Burkitt and diffuse large B-cell lymphoma. The other, more indolent varieties, such as follicular and marginal zone lymphoma, not so much. All right, looks like it's closing time. As a quick recap, just remember that Burkitt's lymphoma is associated with a T1814 translocation involving CMYC, and the endemic form in Africa presents with a jaw mass. Follicular lymphoma features the T1418 translocation involving BCL2, symbolized by that BCL2 bracelet. Diffuse large B-cell lymphoma can involve the same translocation, or the BCL6 gene. You know, that hexagon bracelet on that diffusely large gentleman in the foreground. Lastly, mantle cell lymphoma is associated with T1114, resulting in overexpression of cyclin D1. What makes these different than Hodgkin lymphoma? Well, in general, expect more scattered, non-contiguous node involvement, lots of extranodal manifestations, and most importantly, wait, did you hear that?
Hey, get that thing out of here. There's a sign. Can you read?
No. Well, now I just feel like an ass.